Hello, my dear friends. It's me again, Igor Pogodin, and we're continuing our conversations about life. And today we're going to talk about money. Why doesn't money make people happy? Surely everyone knows the common saying, the rich also cry. Or another one, happiness isn't in money. Then, of course, people add happiness isn't in money, but in their amount. Well, something like that. Money is something that captures the attention and consciousness of probably almost everyone. But why is that? Because money is a condition for a comfortable life. Undoubtedly, if you have money, you can buy something very valuable. You can eat delicious food, live in good conditions. You will gain a certain degree of freedom on a social level, because on a personal or spiritual level, you might completely lose it at that moment. But nevertheless, money, one way or another, provides a certain degree of comfort and security. No one would probably argue with that. So that's probably why most people want money, want a lot of money. Of course, some people realize that in order to achieve this, they have to work very hard. And when it comes to money, we have a huge number of concepts. And these concepts already exist within you. You already have these initial settings, if you will. These concepts were already present in your early childhood. And some of these concepts say that you shouldn't be rich, you should be poor, and then money will burn you. Whatever you do in your life, it will always end with you spending and losing money. Or for example, you will constantly feel hungry and always try to satisfy yourself by earning more and more and more money. Or perhaps for you, money will have a certain form of power and will serve as a substitute for admiration and recognition. And then you will always be dependent on this race to gain more and more and more power, recognition and admiration. That's it. In any case, when it comes to money, all of us have a certain number of concepts that determine the path we will follow. There are people who will become rich, and there are people who will not become rich, and that's just how it is. It seems to us that we can strongly influence this, but we can only influence it to the extent that we go through our life quest, the initial conditions of which look roughly like this. In other words, if you are destined to be rich, you definitely will be. And if not, then there's nothing that can be done about it. No, I hope this doesn't sound pessimistic to you. And I hope you're not looking at me sadly right now, saying, oh God, how can this be? So does this mean I can't change anything in my life? Money is just an initial condition of your life quest. This life quest is not tied to money at all, not even once. But if money becomes something fundamental, the most important thing in your life, you will start to suffer. Although, in fact, even that will truly be determined by the fundamental concepts and core principles you live by. Shura, how much do you need to be completely happy, remember? And Shura Bolganov replies that it's 5,000 or at first 100 rubles, and then he says 4,826 rubles. Something like that. I don't remember the exact number. There's one problem. Money is not a condition for life, it is a consequence. But we don't think that way. We think that our goal is to earn money, and then we'll really start living. That's how our parents, our grandmothers and grandfathers were building communism. Right now we're suffering, struggling, but later, then we'll really live. We're building a bright future. It's the same in life. We think we need money, and then we'll have a real life. But in reality, it's the other way around. At some point, I realized one important thing. We don't control money in life. But we do control our lives themselves. We can either live to the fullest, giving ourselves to life, being open to it, and truly present in it most of the time. And then, at some point, we'll notice that our life is us. And money is something that, is like the associated gas that comes with oil extraction. That's it. Money is an essential attribute that accompanies your vital and ongoing processes. Therefore, strictly speaking, if you are destined to be wealthy, my advice to you is, just do what you do with an open heart and don't object to money. I am a psychotherapist, and all my life I have practiced psychotherapy. And I teach my students to practice psychotherapy. And as experience shows, for some strange reason, our students earn much more than the market average. Much more. but we do not teach greed. Moreover, I always tell my students something like this: money should always be half a step behind you. You should not object to money. That is your entire task. You need to notice. Notice that any thoughts that object to money in your life are simply just thoughts. In presence, this becomes obvious. But that is not you. Just do what you cannot help but do. Do it with love. If you are meant to have money, this is the shortest path to it. They will appear. What is the main problem? The main problem lies in the primary conceptual illusion. This concerns not only money but also relationships and many other things. Fame, power, any resources. It is the illusion of ownership. This is the point where we start to get hurt. This is the point that makes us unhappy. And this applies to money first and foremost, because the very idea of ownership, just say ownership. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is money, or what constitutes capital that can be bought with that money, or assets that can be purchased with that money. I don't know, gold, stocks, real estate, or something else. Clothing. So money is the most vulnerable spot for this illusion. And at the core of the conceptual framework, there is always ownership. Why? Because essentially, the way our personality is formed, it is already shaped by the intensity of greed. But everything we see, we say, this is me, this is me, this is me. That's how the personality is assembled. It's a kind of collective image when we identify ourselves with passing thoughts, emerging feelings, other people's remarks, reactions, things we've seen, news, advertising, and everything else. We cling to all of this and make it our own. It's like a patchwork quilt, more or less consistent, a conceptual patchwork quilt in which we consider ourselves to exist. Can you imagine how absurd that is? In other words, we consider ourselves to be what we've seen and heard simply as a result of identification. And now our whole life has to suffer because of this. Absurd, isn't it? You have never been any of that. The cornerstone of all this is the illusion of ownership. That's exactly what we're going to keep hurting ourselves on. The money you have, of course, you consider it your own, but it's just sitting in your accounts, isn't it? Or maybe it's sewn into your pillow or buried somewhere in your garden at the dasha. Right? And your real estate? Well, the document says it's your property. And your family? And your husband? And your children? You see what I mean, right? And we want to put a stamp on everything. This is mine. In this way, we seem to expand ourselves. We make ourselves bigger and less vulnerable. But the source of this whole illusion of ownership is fear. That's where the problem lies. Fear. Fear and hunger. When I started practicing psychotherapy, I was quite a poor person. I grew up in a poor educated family. My parents were very well educated, but not very well off. My coat was sewn for me from my aunt's old coat. And there were 9 of us living in a small 2-room apartment. So I know what it means to live in cramped conditions. We didn't go hungry, but our meals were quite modest. We lived in modest circumstances. But thank God education was free. I was taught well. And at that particular time, opportunities were not tied solely to money. So I truly know what it's like. Well, I don't really know. I don't want to call it absolute poverty, you see. Well, I guess you could put it that way. And when I started making my first money, when I began to earn, I realized at some point, only about 10 or 15 years later, that I started earning money out of fear, out of hunger. You may have noticed that quite often, people from less well-off families somehow achieve greater success. That's not always the case. Of course, having some initial capital is also important. That's another factor. But if you look at quite a few successful people, they all came from somewhere, Kiev, New York, Moscow, Beijing, from the provinces, from poor provinces. And they're so hungry that they're willing to work harder than others. Their eyes are full of fire. I was like that too. I had 45 clients a week and I was also leading a group. I worked about 60 to 70 hours a week. There was a long period in my life when I was very proud that I slept only 4 hours. At night that was enough for me, and during the day I would take several 10-minute naps. And I was really proud of myself, thinking how great I was. But I was driven by fear. And this fear directly leads to the formation of this core sense of ownership. That now the apartment is mine. Shoo. Now I don't have to worry about where I'm going to live. So I bought an apartment, it's mine for my family. Phew, this is my money. Now there will be something to eat for a while. But if you act out of fear, you will never stop. The fear of poverty will always be chasing you. The fear that you won't have enough will always be chasing you. You have to keep running all the time. I worked a lot. I worked endlessly. I was quite ambitious and competitive. I was indeed very successful, including making a significant amount of money, but the persistent fear never truly went away. And in my life, it subsequently took a series of quite devastating and profoundly impactful blows, rather heavy blows, that didn't just subtly hint but very clearly and unequivocally showed me that any preconceived idea or notion of absolute ownership is, in fact, nothing more than a complete and utter illusion. Any idea without exception. People try to ensure themselves, they get married, and what do? We get married. We swear loyalty to each other until death. And then you either ruin your life or torment yourself by living with someone you don't love, hating them, or you'll keep getting divorced, feeling ashamed, guilty, or something else. There is none. No one and nothing belongs to you. At some point, I even realized one thing, that the academy, of which I am the founder and owner, does not belong to me. I just do a decent job to varying degrees of fulfilling the role of the academy's leader. Not even a leader, really, but more of an ideological inspirer. But nothing belongs to me. Money doesn't belong to me. Today it's there, tomorrow it's gone. And I'm familiar with losing money, large sums. And every time, at first, I would just beat myself up like, damn, how could this happen, pacing back and forth? In fact, it's very useful when life hits you right in your illusion of ownership. Children are not your personal property, nor are they merely an extension of your image, your chosen attire, your established brand, or even the way other people perceive you. Absolutely none of that is truly yours. It fundamentally does not belong to you in any meaningful sense. Nothing belongs to you. You are completely naked before the overwhelming presence. You are utterly exposed. But we don't agree with this fundamental truth. And we desperately want to put on all sorts of protective armor to somehow guarantee our own personal safety and security. That's impossible. Why do people experience tragedies, pain, and suffering? It's solely because of the illusion of ownership. This is one of the most powerful illusions that has permeated us. Well, you had money and now you don't. But you didn't have it the day before yesterday either, right? But you managed to make it yours, and that's why you got hurt. Your husband cheated on you, and for you it's a catastrophe. You started taking antidepressants and are thinking about suicide. Because your husband cheated on you? No, it's because you thought it was impossible. You expected something different, and your property was taken away from you. People who imagine the death of their loved ones experience terror. They mourn themselves in advance. How will I live without this loved one? They mourn their own loss. Do you understand what I mean? They get hurt, they feel pain and horror from their loss. Ultimately, this is our life. We cling to our lives. We think that this is where it all ends. When life ends, there will be nothing more. But what if that's just the beginning and everything exists? Finally, you will be freed from this imprisonment and return home to yourself. Right now, you are on a business trip. It's not a great business trip, not very pleasant, but you want to stay in it forever. I clearly remember when we had to leave because of the ongoing war and subsequently traveled a great deal. Dominic is our youngest. He was 2.5 years old at the time. And for a while we traveled around Europe, lived for some time in London, the UK, and lived in various other European cities. Then we moved to Bali, now we're in Thailand, but that's not important. But every time we traveled, especially around the UK, we traveled quite a lot, both in Europe and in the UK. Everywhere we rented some kind of place, some houses where we would stay for 1 night, 3 nights a week, sometimes even for a month. And every time when we were getting ready to leave yet another house, every time in the morning when we were leaving, Dominic would throw a tantrum and shout something like this. He would cry and say, "We will never come back here again. I don't want to leave. We will never come back here again." And we get attached very quickly. If just 10 minutes ago we thought something was impossible, like getting on a plane, Now it's nothing special, but before it used to be a novelty. We got on a plane and there was Wi-Fi. Can you imagine? We were like, wow, and started using that Wi-Fi. It turned out to be slow, and we started to suffer. Do you see how absurd this is? That's why the problem isn't about having or not having money. The problem is that we base everything on the illusion of ownership. But the most important thing isn't even that, it's the step back I mentioned earlier. We are driven by fear, but it should be something else that drives us. If you want money to make you happy. If you truly desire for your relationships to genuinely help you feel vibrantly alive and profoundly happy, then it is essential to consciously shift your underlying motives from those rooted in fear to those firmly grounded in authentic love. And then everything will change. By the way, if you are meant to have money, it will appear at that very moment. At that very moment, close people who have been absent for quite a long time will also appear. Because before you were looking for a close person out of fear. Fear of being alone, fear of being unwanted, fear of dying alone. It's the same with money. You were afraid of dying of hunger, of being left completely without money, of being needed by no one. Everyone would turn away from you. Fear, 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 fear. But fear is not our true nature. Fear is the result of betraying our nature. So my advice to you is keep living, but do it out of love. If anything has meaning, it's only this. Build relationships out of love. Not the love of one person for another on the condition that, but out of love, because you simply can't help but love. That is your nature. It's the same with work. Do what you do, law, accounting, psychotherapy, because you simply can't not do it. You truly love it. You feel alive in it. And I assure you, money will follow as a consequence, as long as you don't resist it. Because, of course, you have certain beliefs, for example, that being rich is dangerous, right? Or that everyone will start to envy you, or that it will all end badly. He who laughs last laughs best, right? It's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter heaven, or something like that. You get what I mean, right? Don't worry about it. Just allow these beliefs to be processed during therapy, during the experience. In reality, all these beliefs are lying to you. Your task is to grow, and you can only truly grow out of them by living from a place of love. This is very important. Love is your quality. It is a quality of presence. When I say your quality, I mean the quality of presence. Just don't waste a single second of your life on moments where you refuse to be present. That's boring. But being present is a lot of fun. It's very alive, no matter what you're doing. Whether you're recording a video or writing a post on social media, just be present in it, and over time you'll notice, maybe not right away, but eventually, that more and more love appears in all of it. And it spreads around you, to your colleagues, to your work, to your clients, to your business, to your partners, to your loved ones, to the people close to you who are waiting for you at home. A lot of love appears in this because love is a quality of presence. You no longer pretend to love. You truly love what you do. And that's when money starts to bring happiness. But not the money itself. Money is still just a kind of backdrop. It's like little vignettes in a book. It's simply a kind of decoration. If you think that right now, by furrowing your brow, you are controlling the flow of money in your life, that's an illusion. How many people have gone to the same trainings to master the mindset of millionaires? And they realize that people who earn a lot of money spend money easily. They allow the natural flow to happen. So someone understood this, bought themselves a gold watch, and started making a lot of money after that. Imagine that. For example, the same thing happened to me. I bought, for instance, my first small apartment on a 15-year mortgage. It had one small room, the second was very small, but it was in the city center, in the capital. It was quite expensive. At that time, I wasn't earning very much. And I was so scared that I paid off the entire loan in a year and a half. So it was a very significant push in my life. And you could say, Igor, that the millionaire mindset worked. No, it was just fear that worked. And another person bought a gold watch and went completely bankrupt. That was the only money he ever spent. How many people did he... Especially in big cities, people buy a 10-year-old Bentley and can't even afford to fill it up with gas. It just sits somewhere near the entrance of a rented one-bedroom apartment. That's it. But hey, the guy's got a Bentley. But he still doesn't have any money. Money won't appear because of that. Where are you acting from? From fear or from love? That's the question, you see. And truly significant money started appearing in my life the moment I realized I simply couldn't not do what I was doing. I just really enjoy it. I just really love it, and I live in that space. I discovered that apart from love, there's nothing else in it. That's the strongest, most powerful source of making money. It doesn't matter. Close relationships, money. And in this, if you remain in love, you'll lose any sense of ownership. Yes, there is some money in my accounts. But is it really mine? Tomorrow the bank could collapse, hackers could break in, and the money would be gone. Yes, there's some small real estate, but it could burn down. Loved ones, they aren't eternal either. I could die, they could die. We could fall out of love with each other. No, ownership. Nothing belongs to you. The problem is that you are everything, but you get attached to something. The problem is that everything that happens in your life, including all the money, all the relationships, that's all you. And you cling to it like a suitcase, sometimes one without a handle. And you end up all sweaty, flustered, red-faced, and suffering in fear that you might lose it. Try to reformat your mindset, and you'll see that you'll have more money and at the same time more joy. You'll have more happiness, more pleasure. I assure you that's the truth. I assure you. Well, my dear friends, thank you for your attention. I'll see you in new videos. Join our programs and subscribe to the channel if for some reason you haven't done so yet. Thank you for your attention. Bye. See you in the next videos.